Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Lovely to see you all. I hope you have been enjoying the previous sessions. I'm just going to ask our next panelists and presenters just to make their way to the stage. We're going to get started in about 1 minute's time. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're at the back or on the sides, come take a seat. While we're waiting for our presenters to get here, I've just been informed that all of our recordings from the sessions will be available online. So that means you don't have to record or take photographs. You can if you wish, but there'll be better quality ones available online soon after the conference is complete. Well, I think we've got our wonderful friends in the room, Lindy and Tora, if they're here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it's my privilege to present the second to last panel or session for today. We've got one called around cult and care. And so we've seen Lindy yesterday, now we get to meet Tora as well. So put your hands together for our presenters for this second to last panel. Thank you.
Does this work?
Taking the mic lips, and do we need a clicker?
We may need a clicker.
Yeah, thank you. Kia ora. Not working yet. Not working yet.
Clicker.
Try again. Try again. Is that working? Can you hear us at the back? No, not really. Not really on. Oh well, we'll keep chatting. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a clicker.
I think I'm on. I think I'm on. Is that working? Can you hear us at the back? Tora's is working. I think mine's working now. Yeah, awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I usually start with a joke, but I think we're all sort of funny enough.
There you go. Kia ora everyone, and thanks heaps for coming to this final session. I don't know about you, but your brains, hearts, everything's so full and so tired from such an amazing weekend. But thank you for being here. Take a few deep breaths and settle back into your chair because, we'll be chatting over the next 45 minutes or so, or probably about half an hour, and then we'll have time for Q&A as well. So as we talk, if a question comes to your mind, hold it in your brain because there will be a good amount of time for Q&A. So, my name is Lindy Jacomb, and I'm here in this moment on behalf of representing the Olive Leaf Network, which is a newly launched fledgling charity for supporting former members of high demand religious groups. And this is Tora Klevjer, who's the president of Cult Information Family Support, or CIFS, in Australia, which is not so newly launched, began in the 80s, so got a bit of a longer history there. So as the bio says, we're here today to talk about what do care entities do when we're trying to support people in this space. So he's definitely the wise head in the room. We've only been launched for about a year, so I'm a complete newbie, and lots of you in the room are much more experienced than me actually in this space. So my apologies for that. It's rather embarrassing, but at the same time, I'm here, so let's talk.
So Lindy, tell us, how did you become involved in this space?
Oh, how did I become involved in this space? Yeah, I am a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, or the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. I left 15 years ago when I was 20, and in my opinion, for at least the first 5 to 10 years, you're like really raw, or quite a bit raw, but I'm pleased to say that kind of more around that, after 10 years, I began to be much more in a space where I felt like I felt more ready to try and be able to give back. Also, I was really confronted with the reality that while I might have been able to build a new life and have a new community and have found my feet as such, I began to realise that there were still fresh bodies falling from the bandwagon, so to speak, and I had kind of wanted to deny that and just move on with my life. Whereas, I found my father got suddenly kicked out of the group I was from, and my brother as well, and just once again, I couldn't ignore the reality of seeing broken, traumatised people freshly coming out of these groups. This is not just something that happens in the past, it's happening right now, this month, this week, this day. Yanya, in her talk yesterday was showing us some black and white pictures, some more of the historic groups, and we kind of want to go, oh, that only happened years ago or decades ago, whereas it's happening right now that people are coming out of these groups broken, and just that realisation that, my gosh, someone's got to do something. Why has New Zealand got no entity to support people coming out of these groups? There are groups like the Glory Vale Leavers Support Trust, but obviously they have a specific focus. So that was, and I was in a privileged position of having some other people who for several years around me had also been going, let's do something here, let's do something. We've got the kind of know-how around setting up charities. We've got some funds we can throw at it. Let's get this off the ground. So it's definitely not been just me. There's a group of us behind it who've pulled it together. So that's how I ended up here. But I don't have any particular, credentials as such. I'm making it up as I go along. What about you, Tora? You've got a longer story.
Everyone asks me about my name. So it's not the Old Testament name Torah. It's a good old heathen name that comes from Norway, and I'm named after the thunder god Thor.
That's cool. That's cool.
I'm Norwegian heritage. I joined the Children of God group. I was a first generation Children of God, joined in 1976 and stayed there right through to 1986 or so. I left with 5 children and 1 on the way, with my wife and family intact, which was great. And we hit society, as many of you do, with no idea of how to function. Our last 4 years we spent in India, and there was no ready tellers or anything like that. Life hadn't caught up in India, and we came back to Australia, and basically had to beg, borrow, buy, not steal. Salvation Army bailed us out a lot, and so having that first-hand experience of having nothing, trying to get back into society and seeing how hard it was and seeing how little help there is out there for cult people. There was virtually no books, no information, nothing. That made me want to figure myself out, but of course I couldn't trust anybody. So who do you go to for truth when you can't trust anybody? So I started reading self-help books. So one fine day, my wife said, look, you're reading so many self-help books, you're pretty much a psychologist, you better formalise this and go and do a study. So I formalised it and got a counselling degree. Also part of my recovery was joining the ambulance service. It fixed me in a number of ways. It showed me that I could study, that I could learn, and that I could do something. And it gave me a community. And that was just fantastic, to have a safe community to belong to. So from there, I joined Cult Information Family Support, CIFS, the group, and they supported me and gave me a bit of a platform like this to tell my story, and that was the beginning of my recovery. That's kind of me.
So that's how you joined CIFS. So you joined them as a person seeking their support.
Yes, and at the time, it was just a small group of parents who had children in different cults. So it was a support group for parents.
Which, may be of interest to some of you in the room, because there's often a lot of focus on, and rightly on, former members of groups, but a bit of a group that can be a bit invisible, but that are hugely impacted are the family members and friends of people who have joined groups, particularly, for example, if you've lost a child or a sibling as an adult recruit. It can be incredibly devastating for a family. And so, CIFS was begun by devastated parents who had lost children to various different culty groups in the 70s and 80s. So that's still a core thread of what CIFS does, is support for parents. So I often, if we get contacted by parents looking for support, I often send them over to CIFS in Australia, say talk to them, because it's a core thread of what you still do. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about, share a wee bit more about CIFS, because there's a long history there now of you guys operating in Australia. What are some of the key things that you do?
I think your clicker is
Does it
back
have a
in front.
clicker?
I think
Yeah.
it's your turn.
Oh, no, you go. You go. You go.
That's not fair. So we do a lot of support for ex-members. We run an annual workshop. It's usually small. We cap it at about 20. And that's a great time of connection. What I really love about this work is connecting with my people. I've been a member of different churches where people hold up a facade. They want to present their best self to the world. And when you dig a little deeper and you become part of a community of broken people, you start to get real connection and real friendship and real relationship, and I really love that. We support families with quarterly Zoom meetings, so we have an open Zoom meeting. COVID did a wonderful thing for us because we were able to move online and extend our impact. Phone and email, consulting and referral. We get a lot of telephone calls, especially of people who have lost someone to a cult. And, it's just like, my little Johnny's in a cult, how do we get him out? And one call I fielded last year, I explained to these people it's not that simple. You can't just get people out of a cult. It's a process, and you have to create relationship, and started going through a lot of the steps of relating to a loved one who's in a cult. And they said, really, you can't just come in and get them out? What good are you? So that was a bit of a blow. So some of those calls are quite frustrating, but we get a lot of people who want information on how to manage the situation when a loved one joins a cult. So we do a lot of media as well. Podcasts. Lindy interviewed me in a podcast, which was great. And we have one of our members in particular who lobbies government and tries to get change to happen. But as we've heard earlier today, it's pretty tough to get any parliamentarians on side. Yeah.
Thanks, Tora, and there'll be time to ask him a few more questions as well on some of those things. So, yeah. Thank you, Tora. For us at the Olive Leaf Network, one thing I'd like to highlight is a couple of things out of the name. So the network part, what we're doing is networking to support people. So we don't provide therapy ourselves or legal advice ourselves or any financial support ourselves. But as I'm sure many of you will realise, and I think it's the blessing of the internet and the curse of the internet, but resources are there, but they're overwhelming. There's an overwhelming amount of books and websites and podcasts to listen to. And so especially when your brain is all frozen and paralysed and confused, it's really hard to know where to go. And so that, I think, is a real win of being able to contact us, that we can kind of send you some short lists and some recommendations, have a chat with you, and then point you off into various directions that are kind of tailored to exactly your situation. Because, the needs are incredibly different from whether you're an adult recruit who's left after only a few years of being in a group versus someone who's born and raised and your different ages, all that kind of thing. So the needs are really varied of people that contact us. But we kind of, it's a bit cheesy, but go with 3 A's, that we provide aid and advocacy and awareness. And so the aid is just more kind of a word to describe the very practical support. So, for example, a reasonably common issue in the people that have contacted us in the last year and a half is, for example, not having a CV or not knowing how to write a CV, and then also not having anything that they want to put on it because they're embarrassed because all their employment was in this organisation and their previous employer will not give them a glowing reference. and all that kind of thing. And so they're like, how do I go out and get a job when I can't even put together a CV that is worth anything at all? And so we try and work with them to find ways to help them have a good CV and go out and be a bit more employable. So that's like at a very practical level. We get lots of requests for people asking for a therapist who understands, which is a topic that's been covered a lot. And then the advocacy thing is still kind of a bit of a work in progress, but it's trying to address this, so I guess a bit more of a relational need that people come out. Usually social isolation is a massive issue, that they don't have someone they can call a friend or just even one safe, trusted person in their life. And so trying to kind of short to medium term pair them up with a volunteer who's usually got like lived experience, or a peer support type person, or just a caring citizen, but someone who kind of gets the picture, can be their friend, and can help go with them to maybe a medical appointment, or go with them to sit through a court case that they're currently going through, fighting to get their children out of the group, or whatever it might be. So trying to provide some of that relational support. And then the awareness thing is, raising awareness about these groups, because as it's been well covered already this weekend, there's still a reluctance to admit that this is an issue in New Zealand society. And so those are kind of that's the big broad brushstrokes of what we're aiming to do at the Olive Leaf Network. And just to give you a picture, we've kind of been live for about a year and a half, and I tallied up the other day who's contacted us and what groups, and people from over 20 different groups in the last year and a half have contacted us, which was much more than I recognised. And there have been several times when, I'm not a sociologist, I don't have the incredible knowledge of someone like Bronwyn Ridout with her amazing knowledge of so many different groups. But so many times I'm Googling it, like, what is this group? And they're there in New Zealand and they've got 1,000 members or whatever. So it's been very eye-opening. And we get contacted between, on average, 5 to 8 times a week. And of that, about 3/4 of the people are looking for support. The other quarter are, like a media query, or someone who says, I'm a school teacher, and I think this kid in my class, their family is part of this, what do I do? Kind of more, wider queries. But so that's a little snapshot of the picture of the last year and a half for us. What about you for CIFS? Who usually contacts you? Is it, you've mentioned parents, that's
and ex-members who are trying to find their way, and occasionally current members. And that was a really interesting little story. Last year, I had a girl from the Shincheonji Korean cult call me, and I don't always pick up the phone because it just takes too much of my time, so it's usually a message there just asking people to leave a message, we'll get back to you. But I picked up the phone this time, and there was a nervous little female voice on the other end of the line going, hello, I think I might be in a cult. And I said, tell me more. And she started telling me about Shincheonji and how she'd stumbled across some information and she thought it was very cult-like. And I talked to her for about an hour and a half. She stayed in the group for a little while, but she was calling me every week. And every week I was having a bit of a chat with her and talking to her. Because as you know, it's such a big thing to leave your community. All her friends were there. She was an African girl, and as many in Shincheonji are, they're targeted because of their vulnerability, just no friends and all that sort of stuff at university. So finally she did leave, and along with her leaving, her family left. Her mother was in, her sister was in, her good friend was in, and about 7 people just roller coasted out of this cult. And then her and her family made a trip to Wollongong, sat in the living room, and we did a full debrief, showed videos, talked about control, and that was my most satisfying moment last year. But that doesn't happen every day, but that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going, and that was just amazing. Yeah, so we're still in touch. I'm still in touch with her and her sister particularly, and so we have kind of a bit of a mentoring relationship that's continued on over about a year now, which has been very satisfying and really great. But you touched on something with resumes and finding employment and stuff when you come out of a cult, and what do you do with all those lost years? How do you put that on paper? And that's a real challenge, writing a resume for many people coming out of the more closed cults. I think with some of the groups like Jehovah's Witnesses and the like, you may have had a job in society, so that's not an issue. But many of these more closed groups, you don't have this information at your disposal, so it's a real challenge. Do I lie? How do I frame the past so it looks okay? That kind of thing, yeah.
Would you like to share a bit more about what you've seen are the frustrations or the limitations of what an entity can do?
Good click.
What? Am I going backwards? Sorry, people. There we go.
I've thrown you off.
There we go. Oh, you've got a list there.
I've got a list. I'll work from the list. Counselling referrals are a big one. We have some, but nowhere near enough. So anyone who's studying counselling, log on, let us know where you are, let Lindy know where you are. We're always looking for referrals in certain cities because, as you know, face-to-face is optimal with counselling.
A quick note on the counselling thing. One of the challenges, you can go to a website, New Zealand Accredited Counsellors website, and put in the search function. You can put in things like anxiety, domestic violence, and it'll bring up therapists who've got that. But I went there and, you put in, this is a year ago now, so it might have changed, but put in cult, and absolutely nothing came up. So you had to do a lot more kind of diving around to try and find a list of recommended therapists that we now have, and largely we compiled that through recommendations from people, which is fantastic. But what I discovered is that I think people are there are therapists who do have experience and can support in this area, but for some reason they're shying away from naming the cult thing. Instead it was often under things like faith crisis or spiritual transitions or some kind of more muted language. So maybe that's part of it is finding the right language, or maybe, and then I've had a few therapists who say I don't want to put in my bio that I do cult recovery because I'm currently supporting people in a cult who don't believe they're in a cult, or their husband won't let me come if they know I'm a cult leaving support person because they don't, so there's a lot of that actually. And so that's a very real issue, is that if some people have got quite a big client base of clients who are currently in a group, but they can't say I do cult recovery because they'll lose all these clients. I hope I'm making sense there. So that's a really bizarre dynamic there that people have to kind of dance around when you're in a professional capacity interfacing with people currently in a group. Carry on. So that's a slight frustration, I guess, but carry on, or a limitation. What else is there?
I suppose the big one is the lack of people who want to be part of CIFS and who want to be active in helping us function. There's a lot of people, but there's not a lot of people with the skills and the time. People coming out of cults a lot of times don't have the money to spend on counselling. So funding is a big thing. If we could have funding grants or money to provide people coming out of cults with the finances they need for therapy. The Australian Medicare system is really limited in giving you only something like 10 sessions. And then there's a gap fee of about $90. So if you've got no money, $90 is still a lot of money. There's a lot of limitations. It's a volunteer organisation, so people can only give what they're comfortable to give. You can't push people. They've been pushed. They're ex-cult members, so they've got to be treated gently.
The other really obvious thing is that, I think it's been said here, but these issues are complex. There's no quick fix. Sometimes there can be an attitude, sometimes among former cult members, where you're sort of hoping for there is going to be a quick fix, because you've kind of come from an environment often where you've been taught, here's the answers, here's the solution, here's what you have to do. And sometimes people can actually come to you with that attitude of, hey, you're the support organisation, support me, fix me. Whereas the reality is that, life just isn't that simple. Just being down in the survivor kind of reflection with Dr. Lindy Jacomb in the last hour, and lots of people there giving feedback around what it's been like for them as former members, and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. But at the end of the day, it's complex, it's multi-layered. Most of the time you're dealing with various kinds of trauma, which itself is complex and multi-layered. And so there is no quick fix, is the sad reality. The other thing that really interests me is that, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a therapist, this is just a layperson's kind of reflections, is that the wounds that are caused in relationship, I've heard it said, also need to be healed in relationship, or at least a large part of them. That, if you've learned things like that people are unsafe or whatever, that the only way to really learn to build safety and trust with people is through experiencing safe and trustworthy people. You can't just sit alone in isolation and teach that to yourself. You have to experience it. And so there's a huge aspect to the support of a former cult person that needs to be a communal response. It's a social response. And we can't provide that, an entity can't provide that, Decult Weekend can't provide that. You've got to go back home to wherever you live and find one or two safe friendships or people or relationships there that support you, and that looks really different for different people. Like, I know one guy in Wellington who he struck up a friendship just in a local cafe, and that saved his life. He would go there nearly every day for months on end now. It's been months and years, and it almost became like a sort of a family for him. There's no way he'd step inside a church again, or no way he'd come to a weekend workshop. He couldn't hold down a job, but that was the one safe place where he knew he could come in and out those doors whenever he wanted. They were just always going to be there. There was always music playing. It was a relaxed atmosphere. That became a safe place with some safe people. So it's like, that's a complex thing, because you can't just, when people contact us, we can't just hand you 2 or 3 friends who are safe and trustworthy. But that's a key part of the recovery of this kind of journey. So, yeah. Any other limitations there?
I'm thinking maybe we should hand it over to Q&A.
Yeah. Oh, can you just talk briefly, first and second generation blame and guilt? Because that's really complex, and you've experienced that as a father of 6 people, and as an adult recruit, you bred in there and then came out. Like.
I'm a breeder.
You must have experienced this, the difficulty with the second generation. Yeah, do you want to just talk briefly about that? Because it's tricky.
Especially with the children of God, but I think it goes across the board that a cult member also becomes a perpetrator, usually, or quite often, in the more extreme cults, especially because, as we've heard in this conference, that the cult leader is actually the parent, and the parents are middle management. So then you have children who, when you come out, they blame their parents because you are ultimately responsible. You're my parent. And then you have the parent who is overwhelmed with shame and guilt, who wants to say, but don't you understand, there were mitigating circumstances. So the big trick is, where does the blame and shame stop and the forgiveness start? And I think the answer to that is that it really is a two-way street. So for second generation to try to cut their parents some slack and some forgiveness and try and work towards a boundaried relationship. It doesn't have to be the ideal, perfect, huggy relationship. It may be a different relationship. And for the parents to recognise that their children need acknowledgement, and they need an acknowledgement of the harm done. So for the parent to say, look, I'm really sorry. Yes, I was too harsh. I was a terrible parent. I spanked you too much, and to admit that. Or if sexual abuse is involved, I didn't provide a safe place for you. You're my child. I should have done that. The second generation needs to hear that. But the first generation finds that really, really tough, because it's really tough for us to say, I want to apologise to you, but I don't want to do it without a but. And that's not what the second generation wants to hear. They want to hear an unreserved apology. And so it's this dance, this relationship dance, that's very difficult to negotiate on both sides. The second generation thinks it's all up to the first generation to make it right because, you were the perpetrator. But it's much more nuanced than that. So, I'll just leave you with that thought, and hopefully that'll be a starting point to restoring some family relationships.
Thanks, Tora. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lindy and Tora. Thank you for the incredible work of the Olive Leaf Network and CIFS Australia. Lindy, I just want to say, you often keep saying that you weren't a therapist, but you are more than that, and nothing against therapists. You are a safe, trusted messenger and a community navigator and facilitator. And people, I'm sure, approach you because they know of your own lived experience. And on that note, it's important we do acknowledge the importance of lived experience in our human rights work. In fact, the Scottish Commission of Human Rights actually have done a whole paper recognising the importance of lived experience in human rights work, and they even say that the lived experience should be noted in some cases on the same level as those as a lawyer in other places. So I want to say that you're amazing, and thank you for what you do. Thank you, Lindy. And not only Lindy, but you as well, Tora, as well, who upskilled yourself to be able to provide this support as well, the clinical support as well as the lived experience.